Hello, and here we go. Part two of the 5 second rule, chapters 5 through 8 today. And welcome, Gina and Abby. Glad to have you with us today. Hi, Christy. Um, okay, so to start with on chapter 5, does anybody have any takeaways you'd like to share? Chapter 5 is about everyday courage.
I had no idea that it was 1955 that Rosa Parks made her statement on the bus. I thought it was much later. That's
Oh,
early.
mm-hmm.
Man, it was a long time before they took those signs off of the water fountains and off of the bathrooms and stuff like that.
Right. Mm, right. No, I starred her quote here at the beginning of the chapter that I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made, this diminishes fear. Knowing what must be done does away with fear. And it definitely does.
I definitely I have experienced that in my business where there are times when I absolutely have to make X amount of money
Mhm.
to take care of the things that my family needs. And in those times have been some of my for sure highest producing months. And when things are easier or more comfortable and I'm okay with a certain amount and I
Mhm.
don't want to push it, I'm those are typically low producing months unless they still are a little high because I put so much effort in the month before. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying?
Right.
And it is because like taking care of certain things that my family needs when it's non-negotiable to me. And so I will talk to as many humans as I need to about Plexus to make that happen. And sometimes I don't have that urgency.
Mhm.
And there's a huge difference in my paycheck when I don't have that urgency. And so I think, what you just said is absolutely right. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I have experienced that as well. A year ago, right now, I was in a situation where I owned a rental property, which was my townhouse that I lived in before my husband and I got married. And it was coming to a point where I had owned it 20 years and I had a balloon payment coming due on one of the mortgages. And I needed to get the tenant out because I needed to sell the property. And the tenant, long story, and I don't want to go into all of that, but he hadn't paid rent in like a year and a half. Um, so I needed to get him out and get the property ready and get it sold from like right now, a year ago, the balloon payment was coming due at the end of March. And I
and
did
it's
it.
hard to get somebody out of a house too. It's hard to,
Yeah.
we own a
Yeah. I
bunch
mean,
of properties and or manage a bunch of properties and getting somebody out is not the easiest thing.
well, fortunately, I did not have to go with the legal route and actually evicting. He was cooperative. Had told me if I needed him to move out, he would move out. And I finally got to the point where it was like, yeah, I need you to move out. Actually, I had gotten there like 9 months before this. Um, but he had health problems. And like every time he would start to try to take action on something, he'd wind up back in the hospital again. I mean, he was back in the hospital like every month. And so it was really difficult.
Yeah.
So, would y'all excuse me for 1 second? I've got to go find out what Lola's barking about.
Mhm.
This is her I need help bark. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I will carry on. Um, she talks a lot about Rosa Parks and listening to her original interview and how, she just didn't hesitate or think through it. She wasn't being treated right and she took action. Um, and she said, it happened so quickly that I did not have time to think it through. It is probable that if I had, I would have declined the nomination. Oh, that was Martin Luther King before I also did not know he was post Rosa Parks. In my head, he was pre Rosa Parks,
Me too.
but
Yeah, I thought that too.
so, and I love his honesty because like for real, if he had known what was coming, for sure he wasn't. Nobody like lives that life of like, yes, notoriety, but the turmoil and the things that his family went through and he went through to literally change a country. Like, I don't know that there's not a lot of people that are like, yep, sign me up. Like, so go ahead,
Right.
Angie. I didn't know how long you were going to be gone, so I spoke.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. So yeah, I liked her quote, Rosa Parks quote on page 63. And then when Mel really started to dig into her story starting on page 68, and just her story turned out to be kind of the backbone of the chapter, but that was fine. Let me see here. And I think that's where you are anyway, because you were saying how she didn't hesitate. There was no time to talk herself out of it. I had echoes of Atomic Habits in this section again. On the earlier page before that, it's the paragraph, it's got underlining in the paragraph where it says her moment of courage teaches us all that it's not the big moves that change everything, it's the smallest ones in your everyday life that do. That echoed Atomic Habits for me again at that point. That it's a whole bunch of little changes add up to the big changes.
Absolutely.
Let's see. What else do I have? And the moment when she said, it's the radio interview when Rosa Parks is quoted as having said, the time had just come when I had been pushed as far as I could stand to be pushed, I suppose. And I felt like, haven't we all had moments like this? Where we've had all we can take and we stand up instead of backing down.
Absolutely.
So,
Lots of
That
them.
pain is greater than the consequential pain.
yes, yes, that's a good way of putting it. And then further down that page, in the paragraph that starts with Dr. King was also pushed into the spotlight. And it's saying the same thing in different words, but it's just reinforcing it. It's a moment when your instincts, values, and goals align, and you move so quickly you don't have time or a valid reason to stop yourself. Your heart speaks and you don't think. You listen to what your heart tells you to do. Greatness is not a personality trait. It's inside all of us, and sometimes it's hard for us to see it. And that reminded me of a quote from Shakespeare, one of his plays that I taught every year to my 10th graders. And a quote in the play says, the eye sees not itself, but by reflection, that we often have to have someone else reveal our greatness to us. That we don't see, or at least I don't see what my good qualities are. And I think that comes from the area of we're all our own worst critics. So we can tell you, or I can anyway, I can tell you what all my bad qualities are, that I can't tell you what my good qualities are. And, from time to time, something will come up in a training or whatever, and it's like, what are you good at? How would you describe yourself? And well, I don't want to describe myself with my negative qualities, but because I don't recognize what my good qualities are, I struggle with that. And I often have to ask somebody else, what are my good qualities? How do you see me? Etc. And I
We're
think
not
that's kind of sad.
to look at our good things.
Pardon me?
We're never taught to look at our good side.
That's true. That's true.
And the way we were raised, they did not praise us for the good things we did. They always pointed out what you're not doing right. None of the
Right.
other has ever come up.
And what you need to do better. Yeah,
Right.
that's true. That's true. Um, all right, let's see. What else do I have? Um, I actually I underlined several things on the next page, but it's still just that reinforcing the same idea. It probably hasn't occurred to you either what great things you might be capable of achieving at work and in your lifetime. And that's true. That courage is a push. And the advice, do not look at our heroes in history, business, art, and music and assume that somehow they are different than you.
Mhm.
It's not true. So I guess it wasn't this chapter. It's in the next chapter, something else I want to talk about. So I'll hold off on that. Um, but, and that courage is a birthright. It's inside each and every one of us. You're born with it and you can tap into it anytime you want. It's just, these are all things that I definitely needed to be hearing. Like, for instance, I mentioned to Christy before we started the recording that this has been a week of, I just haven't been feeling it. Of course, I want to blame it on the fact that we started out the week in the deep freeze, and we just don't do that down here in Southeast Texas on the Gulf Coast. Even when the rest of Texas freezes, we usually don't, because just the humidity from the Gulf makes this bubble that makes it difficult for the temperature to get that low here. Well, we got down into freezing here as well, and all I've wanted to do is just curl up with a blanket all week and not go anywhere, and just I
Angie,
haven't been feeling it.
there is a part in one of the chapters, I don't remember which one it is, but I believe it's in this section where it talks about what usually hurts us is we go off of our feelings. We don't feel like doing something. And I actually caught myself like thinking that to myself this week. I needed to do something. I don't remember what it was, but I remember thinking to myself, well, I don't feel like doing it. And I was like, oh, whoops. So yeah, I mean, I get it. We don't feel like doing things, but we have to power through them.
Yes.
I just don't know sometimes how to power through in certain situations and not power through in other situations. You were talking earlier about your, job. You just do what you need to do, make those chances, have the courage. I've made a lot of courageous decisions with my quote unquote main job, but for whatever reason, Plexus still paralyzes me.
Same. Absolutely the same. And I guess because, when I still had a quote unquote 9 to 5, my job wasn't 9 to 5, but when I was still employed, I was obligated to someone else. And the difference with working Plexus is the only person I'm accountable to is me.
Right. But
Really.
we know Plexus can be super beneficial. So what is it that holds us back? I just made a huge jump in my career where I went from being an EA at a company that I was with for over a year that I really loved to making a jump into an unknown field that I know nothing about, to the point like I actually hate technology. It actually intimidates me. And I'm going into a role with fiber optics. So,
Ooh.
and I kind of made that decision on the fly. It happened super quick. So if I can do it there, why can't I do it with Plexus?
I guess we're not to our own selves or true.
People I've coached over the years, a lot of times what I see come out of much longer discussions, digging in deeper, is that you get to the point in your career or your job that you're being paid for, like being a teacher or things like that, and you're really comfortable in that. You went to school for that, you're trained in that, you get extra education, you've spent a lot of hours becoming great at that, and like, I'm an expert in this field. I could stand in front of people and talk about this and train people how to do this. And you're very confident in that. And not a lot of people feel as if they are experts in Plexus. They don't feel like they're experts in handling objections. You don't feel like you're an expert in sales. And when you come from a place of like, I'm really great at this, and you have a lot of confidence around that, it would be great if that confidence rolled over into network marketing, but it rarely does.
Mhm.
Right? And so that's typically what it is. It's not, it's the whole like 10,000 hour rule. I mean, Angie, how many hours have you spent teaching, learning to teach, researching, CEUs? Like how many hours? Probably more than 10,000,
Oh, way more than 10,000.
which makes you an expert.
Mhm.
Like that's the rule. Like if you've done it
Mhm.
10,000 hours or more, you are an expert in that area. How many hours do you think you've spent not learning how to sell Plexus, but actually actively selling? Because don't you think there was a difference in learning to be a teacher in college and standing in front of a classroom and teaching?
Yes.
I mean, this
A
was
lot of it was
valuable.
still learning,
And
but
it's needed to learn always, but also the action of standing in front of a classroom
Mhm.
and teaching kids is different, and that those hours are what make you better prepared to teach other people who would like to be a teacher, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's
So
true.
when you think of Plexus and you're to really grow, you need to be able to teach other people how to do it. Well, that
It's
only
true.
comes from you doing it a lot, if that makes sense.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It absolutely makes sense.
So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
we
a
kind
really
of
good
squirreled, but
parallel.
when Abby was saying like, how can I be so good at this and have no fear to do this? And so
No, that's absolutely correct. Um, I noticed on page 71, which if you're using a digital book, it's about a page beyond the courage is a birthright place. The paragraph begins, and it's a series of examples, but the one specific one, it says in China, Psy has just signed on as a distributor for a new skincare line. She has at least a dozen people she wants to call. She looks at her phone and hesitates. What if they think I'm being pushy? And it's like, we've all felt that, I'm sure. That it resonated. It's like, oh, look, there's a network marketing example. In addition to all these other examples of people having to push
yeah,
themselves, that we have to push ourselves as well. Hmm. Um, about a half a page down from that point, then the paragraph begins. Seth Godin once wrote, a different part of our brains is activated when we think about what's possible rather than what's required. And I need to do more of that. Instead of focusing on, I've got to dig up my list wherever it has gotten itself buried to. Need to dig that up, refresh that, sit down at the computer, send the messages, do the follow up. I need to focus on the reward, what's going to come out of that, instead of letting myself get bogged down in the have tos. The have to is going to get me to the the reward, the what's possible.
yeah, for sure.
Um, and just, yeah, I struggle with that. Focus on the solution rather than the problem, and just flipping that switch is liberating. So I have a 22-year-old nephew who's on the spectrum, and often he'll come to me with his issues because, I mean, his parents are his parents. You know, sometimes it's easier to talk to an aunt or a trusted friend or whatever, and I've always tried to be that for him. And he wants to focus on the problem and the thing that's bothering him, and that's often what I'll do with him. Is like, okay, but what can you do about it? What can you do to change it? And sometimes it's hard to get him to shift because somehow he gets some kind of reward out of just worrying about the problem and focusing on this is what's wrong. But I try to bring him out of that by gently asking, what can you do about it? What can you change? What can you do differently to make the situation different? So I'm not always successful because frequently I get, I don't know. I don't know what I can do about it. There's nothing I can do. But
That's what I
try.
get with my 14-year-old. I'm starting to ban him from saying, I don't know, because it's like, let's think about this, kind of like what you were talking about. Let's focus on the
Mhm.
solution, not the problem. I understand we have a problem, but what can you do about it? Because sitting here and not coming up with a solution doesn't help, or just saying, I don't know. I want to think for himself and be able to come up with these.
Excuse me. In teaching, what I would try to encourage students to shift to instead of I don't know is to say I haven't figured that out yet, or I haven't learned that yet, or I don't know how to do that yet, rather than just I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. That's I drilled that into my kids because one of the things I learned in coaching training is when you say I don't know, your brain legit is like done.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I don't know. And so I never, whenever my kids would say that, I'd be like, not an option. Everything is
Mhm.
figure outable. We're gonna figure it out. What are some options? But I would always say to them, like, hey, saying that to your brain means that it stops looking for answers. And the answer is out there.
Right.
So that's why we just don't, that's why we don't say that. Like it wasn't a matter of like punishing them or like it was like you're telling your brain to we're done. We can't do this. And that just isn't a way
Not an
that
option.
we're
Yeah.
gonna live life. So we
Yeah.
don't say that.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, let's see. So in this chapter, uh, on the part about courage is not a personality trait, it's a birthright, etc. Can anybody think of a time when you were courageous and used that birthright?
I think anytime I send a message about Plexus to someone who hasn't asked about it,
Hmm,
that is courageous.
that's true.
In my in in my daily trying to
Hmm.
make money thing.
Yeah.
I mean, when I chose to birth my child as an unmarried single mom, that was courageous. Like I think we've all done really big courageous things. Like to me, that was a very courageous thing to have a kid when I wasn't married. But on the daily, literally messaging somebody, you know, who
Hmm.
hasn't reached out to me about Plexus, like also if it causes me a little bit of like, and I do it anyway, that's courageous.
Absolutely.
If it's
Absolutely.
easy, it didn't take me any courage. Like responding to people who reach out to me about Plexus takes zero
Easy.
courage whatsoever. That's just like what you're supposed to. It's just my job.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Um, how about a time when you wish you were more courageous? Anybody have a time you can think of when maybe the 5 4 3 2 1 rule would have come in handy if you had known of it at the time, but you were not courageous, you didn't step into the opportunity?
I think first of all, we have to recognize an opportunity.
true. It's very true. And often we don't recognize that, yeah, we don't even know we don't even recognize that it was an opportunity because we didn't do whatever, we didn't step into whatever was there, and we don't even know what could have happened because we didn't go there.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
a blockage of fear, and sometimes that's unconscious as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think all of these years have been wasted in a way with Plexus, in the sense that I haven't made it the way I should be. I'm not courageous enough to share it the way it needs to be shared. And, how could things be different now if I would have had a little bit more courage? And honestly, I still don't know if I have it now. I'm still very paralyzed by it. But, I do look at it. I've been with Plexus for 8 years, almost 9. Things could be so much different if I would do all the daily things.
Same.
Same.
But I also tell myself that all things happen in God's time. So I try not to beat myself up too much about the woulda, coulda, shoulda. And just look forward, because I could get really down on myself, because Abby, I've been in it 9 years now. I think. Yeah, I joined in November of 2014. So I've been in 9 years, and I am not holding rank at gold. I've been gold for almost 5 years and have never hit gold since the month that I went gold. But
I'm a lot like you, Angie.
and I know it's nobody's fault but my own, because I haven't been consistent and I haven't done what needed to be done, and I know what needs to be done and I haven't done it.
Correct. I'm the same.
And I could really, really go deep down in a dark hole beating myself up about that. But rather than beating myself up about it, I just say it's going to happen when it's time. And when it's time, I will do the things that need to be done, and things will fall into place. So it's, yes, I've got to do my part, and God will be in it when that happens. Does that make sense? Because I'm
Just
not,
got to be in everything, or it ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
Period.
And I'm not saying that I necessarily dwell on this day in and day out. I was just kind of answering the question in the sense of when did you have an opportunity to be courageous and you haven't been?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, I do have my moments to think, oh, I could be X, Y, and Z, but I do agree with you. Everything is in God's timing, and there's a reason why it hasn't happened yet, why I haven't gotten off my fears and just did the work.
Right.
But yeah, it makes total sense.
Well, I just felt like I wanted to say that because I've heard you say that before. And I feel like we are in the same boat, and maybe we should talk more about that one-on-one.
Yeah.
Link arms, do what needs to be done. But I just, because I hear that you're struggling with it, I just wanted to say, don't beat yourself up about it. What happened, and you can't change that. Just focus on doing differently going forward.
Maybe just let this be the last time that this comes up, and recognize it and move on.
Maybe. And quite frankly, I probably need to do the same. And there's no probably in there. I need to do the same. Let this be the last time that I say I've been inconsistent, that I spent my week not feeling it, and therefore didn't even prepare for book study until this morning. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I did it, and I'm here, and I'm good. We're moving on.
We're doing it. Yep.
We're doing it. And I got all 4 chapters done, because I almost got to a point of, oh, this might have to be good enough. And it's like, no, good enough isn't going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. So I need to apply that elsewhere. That good enough isn't going to cut it. Okay, so let's move on to chapter 6, because it's already 12:30. So with chapter 6, I said, wow. Wow. Um, I liked, I don't know, I think it made my teacher heart happy. I think that we're talking about Martin Luther King this week. That it's
It is.
Martin Luther King Day was on Monday, and here he's coming up in our study. And his quote there at the beginning of the chapter, "The time is always right to do what is right." And that applies in so many areas. Did anybody have specific takeaways or things that resonated in this chapter?
I do like where she said, we waste so much of our lives waiting for the right time to have the conversation, ask for the raise, bring it up, or start things. It
Mhm.
reminds me of that famous Wayne Gretzky quote, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Here's the thing, you never regret the shots you do take, but you always regret holding back. And I think that's true. The
Mhm.
amount of times I've been ghosted or been told no, I never regret having reached out. Ever. Ever. And that's something I need to remind myself of, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't regret any of the shots I took on people that, even if they didn't join.
Or even if they didn't respond well.
Yes.
I've had those experiences, but I
Yes.
just have to step back and think, you know what? That's a them problem. That's not a me problem.
Yeah.
So, um, so on page 76, just below the two little boxes from Blake, in that paragraph starts off, whatever reason you hold yourself back, you are wrong. It's not safer to stay quiet. It's not better to keep the peace. It's not futile to try. It's not risky. You are wrong. All your excuses and reasons are wrong. And what echoed for me in that sentence was from the book, What Do You Say When You Talk to Yourself?
Love that
That
book.
the brain believes what you tell it.
Mhm.
And if you tell, and not just what you tell it, but what you let other people tell your brain.
Mhm.
If you get told that you're worthless enough times, you believe it. But if you get told that you're fabulous enough times, you can start to believe that too, even if you're the one telling yourself you're fabulous. Um, so I just made a note in the margin, because Christy and I talked last week when we did this book study about how everything is connected to everything else. And I like to notice, particularly as an English teacher, I like to notice when the theme from one book comes up in another book, and how things are related. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon,
Mhm. Yeah.
but how all of literature seems to be connected and the same themes come up over and over again. Because what I used to tell my students is that literature is commentary on what it means to be human. Even the fiction, especially the fiction, it's commentary on what it means to be human. So I like noticing the connections, and that was what came up for me here, was that the brain believes what you tell it, and its job is to keep us safe.
Mhm.
Um, I really, really liked the story about her daughter and not deciding to audition when she was offered the opportunity, and not and I said it that way on purpose, not that she decided not to audition, but she didn't decide to do it, because there's a difference.
Right.
But not to decide is to decide.
Mhm.
It's just more passive. And how it wasn't the audition she was afraid of, it was everything that might happen afterwards. What if she found out she wasn't as good as she thought she was? Okay, glad you could join us today, Abby. Hope to
Abby,
see you next week. Um, and I thought that was really interesting. And then that led into that's why we dodge challenges to protect our egos. Are you gonna pester me? All right, come here. Come here. Come on. Are you gonna sit down and be quiet? Okay, so we dodge challenges to protect our egos, that we don't want to find out that we're not as good as maybe we think we are. Again, it's our brain keeping us safe. Um, Mel asked her daughter, "What if you're wrong?" And we all need to ask ourselves that. What if I'm wrong about this? What if I really am as good as I think I am, or maybe even better? Um, and as she says here, we don't ask ourselves this question enough. What if I'm wrong? And then also, so what? So what if you suck? At least you tried. Okay. Did anybody else see Alita Langford's post yesterday that she sent in an audition tape for The Voice?
no, I missed that.
Yeah, she did. And she shared a link to her uh, audition video on YouTube.
Oh, I gotta go back and
So,
watch it.
so Gina, you know who Alita Langford is, right? Yeah, okay. She's I follow her on Facebook and she hasn't popped up in my feed in a while. And then a post popped up yesterday that she had just a few moments before, well, a few moments before posting, it was a couple hours later when I saw it, but submitted her audition video for The Voice. So I was like, you go,
Love that.
girl.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Okay. So under the so what part, you'll never stop yourself from starting to worry about something, but you can stop yourself from letting those worries drag you into a parade of worries that take control of your mind. You can assert yourself and push yourself to think about something empowering. You step back into the present moment and go for what you want, and you can do it in 5 seconds flat. So, this week's chapters were really helpful for me because, for one thing, and I have this in my notes later, but I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to this point. Before we started this book, I was thinking, how did she make this into a whole book? 5 second rule: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, take action. And so I kind of questioned what else is there to it. And I'm glad that she's getting into the what else is there. Now, maybe I'm getting more out of it because I'm digging in deeper in order to lead these discussions. But like Christy said earlier, maybe that's why I'm doing this, because there's so much here that is what I need to hear. Maybe that was where the push came from to say, yeah, I'll lead the discussion.
Mhm.
There's just so much here that I need to hear. This chapters 6, 7, and 8 just stepped all over my toes, all over my toes
You're not
in a
wrong.
way that I needed.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. So after the so what section, then she goes into what are you waiting for? Okay. And this was another piece that I felt like I really needed to hear or read, that when you wait, you aren't procrastinating. You're doing something more dangerous. You are deliberately convincing yourself now is not the time.
Mhm.
You are actively working against your dreams. Ouch. Um, and to think that something as passive as procrastinating is deliberately working against something, that just really turned that on its head for me. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, because it's so easy to procrastinate and sit around and do nothing and say, no harm done. no
Right.
harm done. But harm is done. And at the bottom of that page, the part that's underlined, in the text, it says, you may think you're protecting yourself from judgment, rejection, or upsetting someone, but when you make excuses and talk yourself into waiting, you're limiting your ability to make your dreams come true. And I literally wrote ouch in the margin right there. Ouch. So, as she says further on, there is no right time. There is only right now. You get one life. This is it. So,
Kind of like, how do you create your own circumstances to make it possible to jump in? The circumstances are not always there. And the opportunity may not always be there. But sometimes we have to create our own opportunities.
absolutely.
And I think that holds me back a lot. You know, what's going to happen if I push forward and make the decision that I'm going to create an opportunity? You know, kind of like, you know, what is on the other side of it? But if I make that opportunity and I make that decision, when I make that decision, I also make the decision I will stick with what happens on the other side. Because you cannot fake it, and you cannot be true to yourself one moment and the other time stab yourself in the back. You've just got to follow through with what you're doing. So I've learned if you've made a decision, you make the decision and you just go for it, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, so many
Everything
times we can't control the outcome, but we can control the fact that we at least tried.
And maybe that's all we're given, the opportunity to try. And maybe we're not given even another side of that. Maybe all we'll ever have is, let's just go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to control your decision to show up.
That's it. And that's all you do is show up.
And sometimes, you know, he talks a lot in this book about, you know,
right,
getting out of bed, you know, show up, like
right,
dig into whatever the day holds for you. But
Right.
first you have to
you gotta,
and get going.
you gotta. And if
Yeah.
they ghost you all day long, you've made your decision and you
Yeah.
feel good and they may not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a little bit further down that same page, under you validate your ideas for, you validate your ideas by pursuing them. I underlined, waiting until you are ready will not make it happen. And I made a note that what popped into my brain when I read that was committing to do the thing is what makes us prepare. And then we're more ready than we were. So I guess what my takeaway there is, commit to the thing and then do the work to get ready for whatever the thing is. Like Christy, you run half marathons, halves or fulls? Half?
Both.
Okay. You know, you don't decide the day before the race that you're going to run the marathon.
No. And especially a full, but I've run 4 fulls and I don't know, 11 halves. And some I have trained really well for and followed. I know how to train and I have followed and I've stuck to it. And week after week, I have done the training that needed to be done. And sometimes I've been willy-nilly and I don't train very well and I show up and I always cross the finish line. But I will tell you, I have been in one of the races, crossed a finish line that was already broken down. They left the medals in a chair. Everybody was gone.
Mhm.
And I finished, but that was a race I didn't train for. And oh, the pain afterwards, the muscle aches, like everything about it sucked. And so, but I still did it. and I've finished it. I've never not finished a race. But there's a huge difference also in preparation, and that preparation didn't happen the week before,
Right.
right? You don't earn leaders retreat 2 weeks before it
Right.
ends, right? It was the times that I've trained, I always do a 6-month training and I do the work.
Mhm.
4 days a week, I get my runs in, no matter what, no matter the weather, no matter, unless I'm injured, you go.
Mhm.
And
But
and then
being ready starts with making the commitment to
yes,
do it.
first you sign up for a race, you make sure you have good shoes, you do the things.
Yeah.
And I can use my running marathons analogy. Literally, I can adapt it to anybody's goal in anything in life because and that's the thing. When I finished my first race, I finished it and was like, when I first finished 26 miles, and I remember finishing and saying to my mom, I can do anything. If I could do this, I legit can do anything.
Yep.
And I believe that. Like it is a mindset thing that you're like, I can actually do anything.
For sure. Definitely mindset. Um, on the next page, in the beginning of, well, the paragraph begins, by the way, that's also how Grammy Award winning, etc.
Mhm.
In the middle of that paragraph, you push yourself to get out of your comfort zone and you begin. There is no other way. And the little brain nudge that I got with that sentence was going live. I resist going live because I say I'm no good at it. Well, I'm no good at it because I don't do it. And I'm not going to get good at it unless I do it.
Mhm.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's true. You get better the more you do it.
Yep. Which is true with just about anything.
Everything. Everything. Mhm.
Well, I worked with teenagers for 24 years. Somebody could come up with, one of those teenagers could come up with an example of something that you don't get good at, something that you get worse at the more you do it, but I don't know what
Yeah.
it is. So I always hedge my bets by saying 99%,
It's true. It's true.
because those teenagers, they can always come up with a contradiction. Would you stop, please? Okay, and then Kyra's story in the box. I recognize that she's talking about network marketing
Yep.
because how she went to the blood drive and had exposure to the nurse who was also donating, and then her third party tools, and now she has a new PC or two new PCs, and I thought,
Yep.
but that's helpful to me anyway to see that there are other people applying this for network marketing. It's not me making a stretch to make it apply.
Yeah.
There are
For
people applying it.
sure. Mhm.
Let's see. Okay, and then Tom's story in this chapter about he was with a bunch of business colleagues in a bar, and he saw this woman across the bar, and he had that, had to make that 5 second decision of whether he was going to approach her or not, and how Mel Robbins just teases us along and teases us along. And even at the bottom of this page, in the paragraph that starts, but safety isn't what Tom wants. Tom wants to rebuild his life and find love again, and that's going to take courage. As scary as it is taking that first step to the other side of the bar, Tom is about to discover that all the magic, wonder, and joy in life happens the moment he does. So I wrote there, so did he go for it?
Mhm.
Then on the next page, because I felt like she was leaving it there because there was a new heading at the top of the next page, but the story continues. Tom starts counting to himself 5, 4, 3, etc., etc. At the end of that paragraph, she says, "What happens next is irrelevant." I was like, "What?
Like, oh, oh, I was
How could you do this? You have to tell us." And then she says, drop down a paragraph from there. Notice how we desperately want an assurance that Tom got the girl.
And I
But
did.
getting the girl or not getting the girl isn't the point. It's the fact that he took the step.
Mhm.
It's like, oh. So in my notes, I wrote, well played, Mel. Well played. Making the perfect example
Uh-huh.
of the outcome isn't the point. It's taking the step.
Yeah, because in our minds, we were giving the power to the girl to like him. In our
Yes.
minds, we give our power to the prospects we're reaching out to. But in
Mhm.
reality, what she really goes into here is the power is us. The power is in us. The power is activated when we reach out to somebody about plexus.
Yes.
But too often
Yes.
we give the power to them because what are they going to say? What are they going to do? How are they going to react? What are they going to think of us? That's giving them all of the power. And she's saying the power is in us. And that
You
is
cannot
remarkable.
give away your power.
Yeah.
That just screws up the whole banana
Mhm.
period of this statement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, anything else in that chapter? Because we've still got 2 chapters to go. Or do we want to just hold off and save those 2 chapters for next week?
I
Because
think
it's
that
almost 1 o'clock.
I think there's so much still good in the next 2 chapters. I'm kind of saying, let's do those next week because they're just very powerful. And I would hate to skip over them. Also,
Rush through them.
a 2-hour YouTube video is too long,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because, and maybe we take what we've learned from these 2 chapters, even though we read the other 2, and really, or take all 4 chapters and really kind of take action on them this next week and have an even deeper dive into, hey, I did these things. Because Angie, same as you, I went through chapters 7 and 8 today. So maybe what we do is you make a little challenge in the chat group of take what you've learned from these chapters. We're going to deep dive into 7 and 8 next week.
Okay. Let me
And
make a note.
how we've incorporated what we learned into our action this week. Just a thought. It's you're leading this, but that might be a direction.
No, I kind of like that idea. And I was even thinking as I was scrounging to prepare all 4 chapters this morning, found myself kind of thinking, there is a lot here. And maybe we're not going to get it all discussed in an hour. Hush, hush. And there's in the materials that I found, because I went online to find stuff to support leading these discussions. There's a I was going to present it as an optional activity in the chat anyway, that goes with chapter 6. That it's think about a worry you have that holds you back, write that worry down, and then make 2 columns. On one side, write the best case scenarios. On the other side, write the worst case scenarios. Think about how you'd handle all the outcomes. What you will likely find is, and I won't go into that because then we can talk about that, what you figure out from having done the activity. So that's an activity that I was, like I said, I was going to throw that out there as just optional rather than saying, here's your homework. So what was it that you said though about take what you've learned and just pay attention to how you apply it this week?
Yeah, for a deeper dive into our discussion next week.
Okay. I will put all of that in our group chat for next week's discussion. Okay. I think we're good. So it was so good